The morning sun caught the brass knocker on my front door as I stepped outside with my coffee. Another perfect desert morning in what used to be quiet countryside. My name is David Harrington, and I've lived in this house for 38 years, long before Riverside Meadows Homeowners Association existed. Back when this land was just open ranch country and handshake. Agreements meant something. The envelope waiting in my mailbox changed everything. Thick, cream-colored paper with an embossed Navy seal. I opened it standing there on the gravel driveway, my work boots crunching against the stones my father had laid in 1976. Violation notice number 43. My fence needed repainting. My grass exceeded 4 inches in designated zones. My truck, the same Ford I'd driven for 12 years, was classified as a commercial vehicle and violated aesthetic parking standards. $500 per day until compliance. The final line made my jaw tighten. Continued violations may result in property liens and legal action. Signed by Victoria Brennan, President of Riverside Meadows Homeowners Association. I looked across my property line at their development. 200 identical stucco homes with terracotta roofs, each one painted the exact same shade of southwestern beige. Manicured lawns impossibly green, despite the desert climate. Sprinkler systems running every morning at 6 sharp. Water pooling in the streets. My house was different. Wood siding weathered to honest gray. A roof that didn't leak. Windows that opened. It wasn't ugly, just real, just old, just outside their jurisdiction by about 50 feet. But I could see it from their evening wine patios. And that made me their problem. I've been a civil engineer specializing in water resource management for 23 years. I understand systems, how they work, who owns them, and what happens when people forget where their comfort actually comes from. As I stood there reading that violation notice, I thought about the weatherproof box behind my house, the one containing the pump station controls. The same system that had been pulling water from the Clearwater aquifer since my father drilled a well in 1978. The same system Riverside Meadows had been using, without knowing who actually owned it. 4 days later, violation number 44 arrived. This time, they decided my house color itself natural. Weathered wood created visual discord with community aesthetic standards. Another $500 per day. The notice was copied to 15 households along the border street, making sure my neighbors knew I was the problem dragging down their property values. I drove to the HOA office that afternoon. A converted clubhouse with granite countertops and abstract art that probably cost more than my truck. Victoria Brennan sat behind a glass desk, her blonde hair sprayed into submission, her expression practicing the smile of someone who'd never been told no. "Mr. Harrington," she said, not standing, "I assume you're here about the violations." "I'm here because your violations don't apply to me. I don't live in your HOA." Her smile tightened. "Your property is visible from our community. It affects our residents' quality of life. Visibility isn't jurisdiction." She opened a leather folder, every movement deliberate. "We've conducted a community survey. 87% of residents want you to bring your property up to our standards. That's a democratic mandate. Democracy doesn't give you authority over my land. Mr. Harrington," she leaned forward slightly, "we protect our community's interests. One way or another, we'll find a path forward. I'm offering you the courtesy of cooperation." I looked at her perfectly organized desk, her tablet displaying photos of my property taken from multiple angles. "I appreciate the courtesy, but the answer is no." Her smile never changed, but something cold moved behind her eyes. "That's unfortunate. We were hoping to resolve this amicably." I walked out knowing the war had just started. That evening, I checked my mailbox and found 3 more envelopes. Complaints from neighbors I'd never met. One claimed my truck leaked oil. It didn't. Another said my property attracted rodents. Didn't. Then, Third suggested my neglect was a safety hazard too. Children all copied to the same 15 households. The social pressure machine grinding into motion. Violation 45 arrived the next week. The oak tree in my front yard, planted by my mother in 1961, had branches extending 3 feet over my fence line into HOA airspace. Professional trimming required within 72 hours. Estimated cost, $2,800. Then came violation 46. My mailbox post showed rust discoloration. $50 per day until replaced with HOA-approved powder-coated aluminum. The fines accumulated like compound interest. $4,000. Then $6,000. Each notice copied to more addresses. The audience expanding as Victoria built her case in the court of neighborhood opinion. I started noticing the looks. People watering their roses would stop and stare. A woman jogging past took out her phone and photographed my truck like she was documenting evidence. At the hardware store, I ran into Marcus Webb, a software engineer who lived 4 streets into Riverside Meadows. When he saw me in the paint aisle, his eyes went to his card, then back to me with that particular expression of discomfort. "Hey, David," he said, voice careful. "Marcus, listen. Man, double quotes." He glanced around like someone might be watching. "I don't agree with everything the board's doing. Just wanted you to know that. But you're not saying it where it counts." He shifted his weight. "It's complicated. My wife serves on the Architectural Review Committee. We've got to live here." I nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. In a community where the HOA president wielded that much influence, being friendly with the neighborhood outcast had costs. He pushed his cart toward the registers, and I stood there alone in the aisle, realizing how effectively Victoria had isolated me. The HOA meeting happened on a Thursday night. I hadn't planned to attend, but something Marcus mentioned, probably without meaning to, made me curious. I arrived at 6:45 and stood in the back of the community. Center. Victoria stood at the front with a laptop connected to a projector. About 70 residents filled the chairs, most of them retirees, most dressed like they were attending city council. She moved through financial reports and maintenance schedules with corporate efficiency. Then she clicked to a new slide, and my house filled the screen. The photo was taken at dusk, edited to make the weathered wood look darker, more neglected. Next to it, one of their perfect stucco homes glowing in golden hour light. "This property," Victoria said, letting the image speak first, "represents an ongoing challenge to our community standards." I woke at 5:43 on a Tuesday morning to wrong silence. Not the peaceful quiet of desert dawn, but the hollow absence of something essential. I went to the bathroom and turned the faucet. Nothing. No pressure, no sputter. Just the empty sound of air and pipes. I pulled on jeans and boots and walked out back, where the morning was just starting to gray the sky. The pump station sat in its concrete housing 50 yards behind the house, surrounded by cottonwoods my father had planted. I opened the control panel with hands that already knew what they'd find. The pressure gauge read 0. The flow meter was motionless. Someone had shut the main valve and disconnected the feed line that ran to my house. I knelt in the damp earth and examined the coupling, where my personal line split from the main distribution pipe. Fresh tool marks scored the metal, still bright against the older corrosion. 2 sets of boot prints pressed into the soil. On the electrical box housing the pump controls, someone had taped a printed notice. Warning: unauthorized water connection disconnected per HOA maintenance protocol. Contact management office to restore service. My phone was already in my hand. I called Victoria's direct line, the one printed on every violation notice. She answered on the second ring, voice bright and professional. "Mr. Harrington, what can I do for you? Who authorized work on my property?" A pause, calculated and brief. I'm not sure what you're referring to. Someone cut my water line. Oh. She made a small sound of manufactured concern. Our maintenance crew disconnected an illegal tap from the community water system last night. If you've lost service, it's because you were drawing from our infrastructure without authorization. Something cold and clarifying moved through my chest. That's my water system. That's my aquifer. The distribution network is HOA property, Mr. Harrington. It was built and maintained by our community. If you'd like to apply for a legal connection, you'll need to submit an application and pay the connection fee. $15,000. I'm calling the police. You're welcome to do that. We have documentation showing the work was performed on HOA infrastructure by licensed contractors. This is a civil matter, not criminal. My office hours are 9 to 5 if you'd like to discuss reconnection. She ended the call. I stood there in the growing light, looking at the severed pipe and the bureaucratic notice taped to equipment my family had owned for 47 years. They'd come onto my land at 3 in the morning and cut my water supply, then left paperwork about it like it was routine maintenance. The police officer who arrived an hour later looked about 25. He took photos, read the notice, examined the property boundaries. When I showed him the well permit and water rights certificate on my phone, he studied them and handed the phone back. This looks like a civil dispute, sir. Without clear criminal trespass or vandalism, there's not much we can do. You'll need to contact an attorney. He gave me a case number and drove away, leaving me standing next to my disconnected water line with $40 worth of bottled water in my truck bed and a neighborhood full of people using my water like it was their birthright. The file cabinet in my father's old office held 4 decades of documentation. I spread it across the kitchen table in the afternoon light. The well drilling permit from 1978. The aquifer survey showing the Clearwater Formation 300 feet below the surface. The original handshake agreement with the Morrison family when they'd first asked to tap into our system. And there, in a manila envelope that had yellowed with time, the document that changed everything. Water Rights Certificate number 3749, issued by the Arizona Department of Water Resources to the Harrington Family Trust, granting exclusive extraction rights to the Clearwater aquifer underlying my property. Maximum permitted extraction, 180,000 gallons per day. I cross-referenced it with the flow meter readings I'd been recording for years. Riverside Meadows was pulling an average of 157,000 gallons daily. They were using 87% of my legally permitted water without authorization, without payment, without even knowing they were doing it. I opened the Arizona Revised Statutes and found the relevant sections. Title 45, Chapter 2, Section 45-171. Unauthorized use of water resources constitutes civil theft, punishable by fines and potential criminal charges. Any person or entity using water without proper rights or permits may be held liable for damages, including fair market value of water used, legal fees, and punitive damages. I did the math on notebook paper, writing it out by hand because sometimes you need to see numbers in ink to believe them. Commercial water rates in Arizona average $3.50 per 1,000 gallons. 157,000 gallons per day times $3.50 times 365 days, $200,000 per year. They'd been using my water for at least 17 years. Since the development was built, I stopped calculating because the numbers became absurd. But the legal principle was crystal clear. They owed me, and they'd cut my water while actively stealing it. I found the attorney through a colleague, someone who specialized in water rights disputes and had successfully sued 3 HOAs in the past 6 years. Her name was Jennifer Cross, and when I called her office at 8 the next morning, she listened to my 5-minute explanation, then asked 3 questions. Do you have the water rights certificate? Yes. Do you have proof they're using your water? Documented flow meter readings for 3 years. Do you have evidence they cut your line? Photos, timestamps, and a police report. I can file for a temporary restraining order by end of business today. I'll need $5,000 up front and all your documentation within the hour. I sent her 12 megabytes of evidence. She called back 20 minutes later, her voice sharper, now energized. This is solid. They cut your water while actively stealing it. The irony is almost too perfect. Once we file this, it becomes public record. The HOA will know you're serious. Good, I said, and gave her my credit card number. The complaint was filed at 3:17 that afternoon. By 4:30, my phone started ringing. Victoria's number. The HOA office line. 2 numbers I didn't recognize. I let them all go to voicemail. At 5:10. An email arrived from the HOA's attorney, Mr. Harrington. We've received notice of legal action and believe this can be resolved through mediation rather than costly litigation. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience. I forwarded it to Jennifer without responding. She replied within minutes. Ignore them. They're trying to negotiate before the judge sees evidence. At 6 o'clock, a certified letter arrived announcing an emergency HOA board meeting tonight at 7. All homeowners invited to discuss the water system dispute. I left it unopened and called the regional newspaper instead. The reporter's name was Angela Martinez, and she'd written investigative pieces about local government corruption and community issues. I'd prepared a summary email with key documents attached. When she called me back an hour later, her voice carried the careful interest of someone who'd learned to recognize a real story. Mr. Harrington, I've been reading your documentation. This is remarkable. Can we meet? We met at the newspaper office downtown. I walked her through the timeline, the escalating violations, the community votes, the midnight disconnection, the fact that every drop of water in Riverside Meadows came from an aquifer my family owned. She took notes, asked clarifying questions, photographed documents. How long has your family owned this property? 68 years. How much water does the HOA use daily? Approximately 157,000 gallons, according to my flow meters. Do they know they're using your water? They have no idea. They think it's municipal infrastructure. She wanted to photograph me at the property. We drove separately and met an hour before sunset. She worked professionally shots of me standing next to the disconnected line, holding the water rights certificate in front of the pump station. In my kitchen, with cases of bottled water, while HOA sprinklers ran visible through the window behind me. She recorded a brief video interview. Tell me in your own words what happened. I kept my voice level, factual, except when I mentioned my father's generosity being repaid with midnight trespassing. She said the article would run tomorrow morning, online by 6. At 7 o'clock. I sat on my porch and watched cars fill the community center parking lot. Dozens of them. People arriving to discuss me, to decide what story they wanted to believe. I didn't attend. I just sat in the darkness and watched those lit windows. All those people gathered to protect their perfect world. My phone buzzed with an email from someone I barely knew, a resident deep in Riverside Meadows. The subject line, I'm sorry. The message was brief but genuine. Mr. Harrington, I saw the article being posted tomorrow. My husband and I want you to know not everyone agrees with what the HOA did. We think you've been treated unfairly. We're sorry we didn't speak up sooner. He signed with his full name and address, willing to be identified as someone who disagreed with the majority. The tide was starting to turn. The article went live at 6 the next morning. I read it on my phone while boiling water for instant coffee. The headline clean and devastating. Local HOA cuts water to homeowner who actually owns their source. Angela Martinez had written it exactly as I'd explained, no sensationalism. Just documented facts in order. The HOA had issued escalating violations. They'd voted to pressure my real location. They'd cut water to my house at 3 in the morning while using my water for their entire community. The article included photos of me holding the water rights certificate, quotes from Arizona water statutes, excerpts from the original Morrison Agreement. It ended simply. Arrington declined to shut off water to Riverside Meadows, despite having legal authority to do so, stating he prefers to resolve this through proper legal channels. By 8 o'clock, my phone flooded with notifications. The article had been shared to community forums, local groups, regional news aggregators. Comments poured in, most of them outraged on my behalf. How can an HOA cut someone's water when they don't own it? This is theft. I hope he sues them into bankruptcy. The HOA sent a mass email at 9:30 to all residents. Dear Riverside Meadows residents, you may have seen misleading reports regarding a dispute with a neighboring property owner. We want to assure you the HOA acted within its rights to maintain community infrastructure. I forwarded it to Jennifer. She called back immediately. They're digging deeper. This helps us tremendously. The court hearing happened at 10 o'clock the next morning. The county courthouse was old brick and tall ceilings, wooden benches worn smooth by decades of disputes. Jennifer waited outside courtroom 3 with color-coded folders. She looked up when I approached. They're already inside with their lawyer. Don't react to anything they say. We walked in at 9:55. Victoria sat at the defendant's table with 3 board members and their attorney, a man in an expensive suit, radiating the confidence of someone who usually won through attrition. The bailiff called us to order, and the judge entered, a woman in her 60s who looked like she'd heard every variation of human conflict. Jennifer stood and presented our case in clinical language. The defendant HOA cut water service to my client's property while simultaneously using water from an aquifer my client legally owns. She held up the water rights certificate. This document grants exclusive extraction rights to David Harrington. She presented photos of the disconnected line with timestamps. Flow meter data showing 157,000 gallons daily usage. The violation letters and emails. The defendant engaged in a systematic campaign to pressure my client into compliance with standards that have no legal authority over his property. We asked the court to issue a temporary restraining order compelling immediate restoration of water service. The HOA attorney stood and launched into prepared remarks. Your Honor, this dispute has been escalated by the plaintiff's refusal to cooperate with reasonable community standards. The water system was installed decades ago and has been maintained by the association. My clients believed the infrastructure was communal property. The judge looked at him over her glasses. Do you have documentation showing ownership of the water rights? He hesitated. Your Honor, our position is that long-term use establishes shared ownership under the doctrine of counselor. The judge interrupted. Do you have documentation? No, Your Honor, but then your position is incorrect. She turned to Jennifer. Counselor, do you have the original agreements? Jennifer presented the Morrison Agreement. Pointing to the key language, permission granted for water access through goodwill, revocable at any time by the property owner. The judge read both documents, examined the photos, then addressed the HOA attorney directly. Your client cut water to a property owner who holds legal water rights while simultaneously using that owner's water for their entire community. Do you understand how that looks? Your Honor, we believed. You believed incorrectly. Ignorance of ownership doesn't establish rights. She signed the order with decisive strokes. Temporary restraining order granted. The defendant will restore water service within 24 hours. And is prohibited from interfering with the plaintiff's property or water system. A full hearing on damages will be scheduled within 30 days. She looked at Victoria and the board members. You should have verified ownership before you cut anyone's water. Court adjourned. 22 minutes. 47 years of assumptions corrected in 22 minutes. The contractor trucks arrived at my property 4 hours later. The same technicians who cut my line were now reconnecting it, working quickly, avoiding eye contact. The younger one glanced at me as he tightened the final coupling. Sorry about this, man. We just do what they tell us. I know, I said. It's not your fault. They finished in 38 minutes, tested the pressure, and left. I went inside and turned on the kitchen faucet. Water ran clear and cold, the pressure steady. The sound of it filling the sink like something I'd taken for granted until it was gone. The state water inspector arrived 3 days later with a clipboard and testing equipment. He reviewed the water rights certificate, inspected the pump station, tested water quality, examined my maintenance logs. He asked how long the HOA had been using my water. At least 17 years. He shook his head. They never applied for extraction permits. That's a significant violation. He traced the distribution lines from my pump to Riverside Meadows, documented every connection, then sat in his truck typing before printing 2 violation notices. The first, unauthorized extraction from a permitted aquifer. Fine, $48,000. The second, operating an unregistered distribution system. Fine, $22,000. They have 90 days to negotiate a legal agreement with you, find an alternative water source, or cease operations. What if they don't comply? We shut down their system and fine them daily. Water rights are serious business in Arizona. That evening, another emergency HOA meeting took place. I didn't attend, but Marcus Webb called me afterward, his voice still stunned. They voted Victoria out. 163 in favor of removal. She packed her folders and left without saying a word. 5 days later, Marcus, now interim board president, called asking to meet about the water situation. We met at my property near the pump station. He arrived in a sedan that still had car seat indentations. Looking uncomfortable in business casual clothes, he examined the equipment with genuine interest. I didn't know any of this was here. Most people don't think about infrastructure until it stops working. That's fair, I said. We walked to my back porch and sat in the shade. I offered water from a glass pitcher, my water, running again through my pipes. He accepted with a small, ironic smile. The board authorized me to negotiate a formal agreement. We understand we've been using your water without permission. We understand the state gave us 90 days to fix this. We want to make it right. He pulled out a folder of Victoria's organized binders, but loose papers that looked drafted in multiple emergency meetings. We're proposing a 30-year water service agreement. The HOA pays you $1.75 per 1,000 gallons, covers all distribution system maintenance, and commits in writing never to interfere with your property rights again. We know this is more generous than we deserve. We're hoping you'll consider it anyway. I looked at the numbers. At current usage, it worked out to about $9,000 monthly. $108,000 per year for water I'd been giving away for free, that my father had given away because he believed neighbors help neighbors. Show me the amendments to your bylaws. He pulled out another document, this one more carefully formatted. Prohibitions on using HOA authority for personal retaliation. Requirements for 2/3 votes on major financial decisions. Caps on aesthetic violation fines. Protection for properties outside HOA boundaries. Financial transparency with quarterly reports. This is better than most HOA governing documents I've seen. We had help from people who've dealt with bad boards before. We're trying to make sure this doesn't happen again. I thought about my father's generosity, about midnight trespassing and violation notices, about judges' gavels and systems working correctly when you use them right. I want a clause allowing me to terminate with 90 days notice if the HOA violates any terms. That's fair. We'll add it. Then I'll sign. 6 months passed. Autumn settled over the desert with golden light and cooler mornings. I sat on my porch with coffee, looking out at riverside meadows where sprinklers still ran, but now legally. Water flowing through inspected and certified lines. Paid for at rates we both agreed on. The neighborhood had changed in small ways. Mrs. Helen Porter, who'd lived here 43 years, started bringing me baked goods monthly. We used to help each other, she said over coffee one afternoon. Then we forgot how. I'm glad we're remembering. Marcus had asked if I'd join the Community Water Committee. I declined politely, but told him to call directly if technical problems ever arose. The new board published detailed financial reports now. Violation enforcement focused on genuine safety issues rather than aesthetic conformity. People were painting their houses different colors. Someone 3 streets in it planted a vegetable garden then. Would have triggered violations under Victoria's rules, but was now just accepted as neighborhood diversity. Heard through indirect channels that Victoria had moved to a different community an hour north somewhere, with even stricter HOA rules. I didn't feel satisfaction hearing that, just distant understanding that some people need control more than connection, and when they lose it, they don't learn. They just find new places to exercise it. The system itself had been upgraded with money from the water agreement, new pump motors, updated pressure regulators, monitoring systems that sent alerts to my phone. The HOA paid for everything as contracted, and I'd overseen the work to ensure it was done correctly. As evening came on, I walked out to the pump station one last time before dark. Fall air was cool enough to see my breath in the shadows. I opened the control panel by habit. 47 psi, flow steady at 118 gallons per minute. Everything exactly as it should be. I stood there listening to the water move. That low sound you only heard if you knew what to listen for. I could almost see my father here, watching sunset over open land before fences and bylaws, building this system to last. Sharing it because that's what neighbors did. He documented everything carefully enough that when conflict came, truth was provable. My house still looked old against the backdrop of new construction. My fence remained unpainted. My truck still sat in the driveway. But nobody was sending violation notices anymore. The house was just a house. The fence was just a fence. And I was just a person living on land my family had held for 3 generations. Inside, I opened my laptop to an email from Angela Martinez. Her article had won a regional journalism award. I wanted you to know, she wrote. I've received dozens of messages from people in other HOA communities who've used your case as a template for challenging overreach in their neighborhoods. You changed more than just your situation. I hadn't set out to change anything beyond my own circumstances. I just refused to accept that a vote by strangers gave them authority over my property and my rights. But if other people found something useful in that refusal, something that helped them stand up when systems stopped serving the people they were meant to serve, then maybe it had been worth more than just restoring water pressure. I turned off the lights and looked through the kitchen window at community center lights still on, another meeting happening. But different now, decisions made collectively, transparently, with understanding that communities were built on mutual respect rather than forced compliance. Water flowed beneath all of it, ancient and patient, caring nothing for human disputes or resolutions. It just flowed. We were the ones who decided whether to share it with grace or hoard it with force. My father had chosen grace. Victoria had chosen force. I'd chosen law. And in the end, the law had chosen grace.